All right, hi guys, I'm Tracy. Thank you for joining me today. So today's video is a request from one of my subscribers, Irene, and she wanted to know if I can make a video just explaining how to get your brush collection started for someone who doesn't already own Fude brushes. So I put together a very small list of 5 different types of brushes that I think would be a really great place to start, and I'll give you guys examples of those types. And when it comes to brushes, a lot of what brushes would work for you depends on what kind of skin issues you have that you want to address, what kind of skin type you have, what kind of products you use, and what type of makeup looks you do. So I'm going to try to address some of those, but these are all going to be brushes that I personally enjoy for these 5 different tasks. So I hope that made sense. So I'll just get started. I think the number one most, these are not like ranked in number one. One of the very important types of brushes that I think everyone should have is a powder brush. Now, it doesn't have to be a really big, fluffy powder brush like this. This is the Hakuhodo K002. I mean, if you want a big one, you can. I personally like a slightly smaller and precise powder brush. I think if I had to pick one out of my collection, it would be the Goss number 2 or the Goss airbrush. And if you can't get these, the Sonia G Designer Pro. So I know there's a lot of talk about squirrel hair brushes not being good for oily skin, and I understand that, but so I don't have oily skin, but I use these mainly to set my concealer and my foundation. So these are getting moisture and oils are going into these all the time, and if you leave it and without washing it, yeah, it will be a hot mess. But I wash mine pretty frequently, so if you take care of these and you make sure they don't get too much buildup, they will last you. And if you have oily skin, it's fine as long as you take care of them. So did I mention the Sonia G Designer Pro? So the 2 I mentioned, I believe they're out of stock, and I don't know if you'll be able to get them, but the Sonia G Designer Pro, which is dyed goat hair, I think is a pretty comparable replacement for those 2. I use this pretty much just for powdering my under eyes, and sometimes if I want to get my foundation powdered, I'll use this. But if you can find a really nice squirrel hair powder brush, this is the Chikuhodo Z8. I really think it's a great investment, and if not, you can find some really great goat hair brushes for that, like the Hakuhodo K002 or the B110. You can use this for powder all over, and the goat hair brushes are going to be a lot less expensive. So that is one. Another one that I think everyone should have is a blush brush. So if you like a light application of blush, my favorite one for that is the Sonia G Soft Cheek. I understand this is very hard to get, so another alternative is the Hakuhodo G5538, and Goss makes one similar to this called the 14. So I think, but if you like a very strong blush application, these aren't going to give it to you. So you want to decide what type of look you want with your blush, and if you want a very light diffused look, brushes like these would be good. But if you like to concentrate your blush on a specific area and maybe give yourself a stronger application, the Sonia G Cheek Pro is my favorite for that. But there are a lot of other brushes that you can use in placement of this. Also the Sonia G Classic Cheek, I don't use this just because I have this, I think, and so I actually store this one, but this one is easier to get. So anything that's kind of denser that's about this size will allow you to really concentrate the blush on a specific area. Another one you could use also is a Sonia Phase 2. It's pretty small, so you can get, you know, a very precise application. This one isn't as dense, so it won't pick up as much powder, but this will be a very good size to do specific blush looks. Okay, and then another brush that I think is also essential is a bronzer brush. Now, this is a look that I don't think there's any other way to apply bronzer with a sponge or your hands, especially a powder bronzer. So for me personally, it's very important to have a really good bronzer brush. And I have a lot that I use that I could recommend. One that I think is a great value is the Koyudo BP013. This is a very big brush, so for me it's good because I have a big face, so it can cover a lot of area very quickly. But if you want a more specific blush bronzer application, I think the Hakuhodo B110 is a really good one. It's kind of like mid-size. You can also use this for a blush. And let me see. You have a B110, and you can find so many different bronzer brushes. If you want a very, very small bronzer brush to just do like maybe small little areas, the Hakuhodo G511 is great for that. Also the Z8 would be good for that. If you want a very light bronzer application, this will give it to you. And then I'm going to mention a couple of eyeshadow brushes. So I think number one, the most important kind of eyeshadow brush you need is a blending brush. Now there's so many different ones. I'll mention the ones that I have used and I love. And I think pretty much anyone would like it. Now if you have very large deep set eyes, you're going to need bigger brushes. For me, I don't, so I tend to favor smaller brushes. And the very first Fude brush I got was the Goss 19, and it was the only nice blending brush that I had, and I used this every day for like a year because I just wasn't really into brushes yet, and I used this every day. Also, I was like, why don't I get another one? And then that's kind of how this started. Another type of blending brush that I think is really great if you want your eyeshadow to have a more light diffused application is the Goss number 3 and the Goss number 4. So one is just fluffier and this one is more specific. He also makes a flat one that is the number 6. I don't like this one as much, but these two I really enjoy. I use this one almost every day to set down my transition shade because I like just a really light wash of color to start off my eyeshadow. And I believe these are both still available. They're made out of blue squirrel hair and they're amazing. I've had this one forever and I've washed it so many times and it doesn't shed. Actually, none of my Goss brushes really shed at all. So that's something to note if you're trying to decide between the different brands. And then the other kind of eyeshadow brush that I think is also essential is getting a packing brush. So this is another type that there are so many different ones to pick from. So I know it could be really overwhelming to figure out what kind of packing brush to get. I could recommend one that I really enjoy, and it's the Chikuhodo GSN9. And it's small, but it's not too small. It's made out of gray squirrel hair. And there's something about the way this applies shadow that I really appreciate. Now I don't know if I've ever showed this on my channel, so I'll show you guys kind of how it looks like in comparison to the other ones I'm going to show you. So I already have pretty much my eyeshadow done, but see how easily that just laid down the shimmer, and it was a very specific application, and it's just like the perfect amount. So for me, you know, I have hooded eyes, I have smaller eyes, so I don't need a large packing brush. In fact, I have some that are tiny that I use all the time. If you have very deep set eyes and larger eyes, this might not be big enough for you. In that case, they have a bigger one called the GSN 7. So, you know, all of these things you have to consider when you're trying to figure out what kind of brush to buy. But that is probably my all-time favorite. And then I also really like the Hakuhodo packing brushes. They're made out of horsehair, and I have a few in different sizes. I'm pretty sure this is the J243, and I have a smaller one called the 246HS that, oh, I put it down here, that I really like. It's tiny, and I use it for like the inner corner of my eye to place like a shimmer shade. I'll show on this side. So I use it to kind of like get the inner corner and the inner part of my eyelid. Let me see if I can zoom in a little. So I hope you guys can kind of get an idea. It's a little different from the Chikuhodo. This one is more specific, and I think packs on a more concentrated amount of eyeshadow. And something that, oh, one more, and then I'm going to talk about a little different topic. Also, the Chikuhodo Artist 6-8 is a really good packing brush, very tiny, similar to the 246, but it is a little fluffier, and this is more multi-functional because I can also use it to line the bottom lash line. I mean, technically you could use these to line, but I don't feel that they're the best for lining. I do think these are pretty much solely packing brushes, and I don't recommend them for doing anything else. So another topic that I wanted to briefly bring up that I think will help if you're trying to figure out what kind of brushes to get as far as the different brands, and like which brand would better fit your needs. So let me just give an example. So two brands that I really love is Hakuhodo and Sonia G. So they do brushes differently. There are some that might, you know, seem similar, but to kind of break it down very simply, Hakuhodo has a very large selection. I think they have hundreds of different styles of brushes with all sorts of different hairs. You know, they're a larger company. They've been around for a long time. They tend to make brushes, let's zoom out. Hakuhodo tends to make brushes that are more specific, and they do one thing really well. There's exceptions to that, but like in general, for example, these packing brushes, they pack shimmers on really good, but I don't use this for anything else. Versus a Sonia G brush, which is more multifunctional, and the Builder 3 is a good example of a packing brush that can also be used to line and also do a little blending. Maybe I can show you guys how that would work out. So I'll use the same palette that I did earlier, and I'll put like one of the darker shimmers on there. So it can very easily pack on color like that, and it could also line the lower lash line and blend out this whole area. So I hope that kind of illustrates the general difference between Hakuhodo and Sonia G. So if you're not looking to buy a lot of brushes and you want to get 2 really good eye brushes, you know, you don't want to spend a lot of money, and you know, you don't want to build a big collection, I do think Sonia G does multifunctional brushes the best. And I love her brushes. Pretty much every brush that I have of Sonia G's is amazing. Some of them I don't necessarily use just because I don't really have a place for them in my makeup routine, but they're all really great brushes, and they tend to be more multifunctional. So the only really bad thing is they're hard to get. They're often out of stock, and you know, she's a small company, so it takes a while for her brushes to come back in stock. So that's kind of the downside. One good thing, you can order from Beautylish and get free shipping. Hakuhodo, you pay $9 to get your brushes shipped to you. So you kind of weigh the pros and the cons. Hopefully that'll help you guys make good decisions when buying your brushes. So that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.